Riggs.
Please lift the two near corners of the tablecloth and take a peek beneath. Anything unusual? You know why? Because I'm magic. Thank you. What you just saw is a table moved by an invisible force, a completely natural force, I promise you. But your life in a similar way is moved by a host of invisible forces. Your assumptions, your biases, your defense mechanisms. But at the top of that list, I would have to place your beliefs. Because what you do, what you believe, determines what you do. When you believe the wrong things, that is, when you carry illusions in your head, you tend to do the wrong things. When you believe the right things, that is, when you are stripped of your illusions, then you tend to do the right things. Now, my name is Billy Riggs. Please do not make the very common mistake of calling me Bobby Riggs. Bobby Riggs was the male chauvinist tennis player who back in the 70s lost the epic battle of the sexes to Billie Jean King. My name is not Bobby Riggs. It certainly is not Billie Jean King, but it is, weirdly enough, Billy Riggs. And I am not merely an illusionist. I am instead what I call a DIS-illusionist, which means I don't get nearly as excited about performing my illusions as I do about getting into your head and exposing your illusions, damaging psychological illusions, the kind that form self-imposed barriers to success through which you just can't break. In my onstage presentations, I do a full illusion show, depending on your budget, floating ladies in the air, or floating a small table in the air, or floating a candle in the air. And then I use my illusions as a vehicle to expose the illusions that keep salespeople from selling more, leaders from managing more effectively, teachers from being better in the classroom, all personnel from delivering spectacular service or being team players or having a great attitude or performing at their optimal level. I am convinced that most of life's problems can be traced back directly or indirectly to one or more of life's 8 grand illusions that you've carried in your head since you were a small child, which is why the very best thing that could happen to you today would be for you to leave here profoundly disillusioned. And make no mistake about it, nobody sees the world as it actually is. We all view the world through a distorted lens that changes every bit of information that comes in through our 5 senses, with the result that the message that our conscious mind receives is often very different from what actually exists. And doesn't it make sense that to the degree your perception of a situation is inaccurate, your response to it will of necessity be incorrect? If being a professional magician for 40 years has taught me anything, it is this: the staggering capability of the human mind for self-deception. Any of us can convince ourselves of anything. We lie to ourselves constantly. The theme song of our lives should be, "Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies." Let me give you a concrete illustration. Here is a photograph of 3 young men levitating while practicing transcendental meditation, or TM. In 1959, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi immigrated from India to the United States preaching the gospel of peace and tranquility through meditation. He claimed that while in a deep state of transcendental meditation, he could levitate himself in the lotus posture as far as 3 feet off the ground. Now, nobody ever saw him do this, and it was never captured on camera, but he did promise that his followers would learn the art of levitating the body at will and even the power of invisibility. Now, to be fair, I did find one picture on the internet of the Maharishi levitating while invisible. I'm kidding. He even established a university just 2 hours' drive from where you are right now, Fairfield, Iowa, in which he promised that his students would learn to levitate. And he offered photos like these as the proof. And you have to admit that that is kind of impressive. And they're not even magicians, they're muggles. So, as a magician, I should be able to do something at least as good. So I'm going to levitate myself right here on the platform, the same way that those 3 young men are doing right there. Now, if you're in the back of the room, you're going to have to stand up to see this. If you have a smartphone with a camera, take it out because you'll want to get a picture of me levitating here the same way they are doing it. With one small exception, I will not go full lotus posture because then I would have to discontinue the remainder of the program. You got your camera out? Okay, because I will tell you precisely when to take the photo. I'm going to do it just like they are doing it. Are you ready? Now! That is exactly what they're doing. You see the way their hair is lifted up off their heads? You see this guy's tie sticking out at you? They're hopping. Look at these ladies right there. Look at their hair. The one on the right, they just cropped the trampoline out. Now, why would they do something like that? I'll tell you why. It's because the Maharishi told them that hopping is the first stage of levitation. That if they would just hop often enough, that one day they would just hover. And they bought it. This has been almost 6 decades since he made the claim that his followers would fly. Not one of them has done it yet, but right now, they're in Fairfield, Iowa, still trying. "60 years they've been trying. And I know what's happening. After one of these sessions, a guy turns to his buddy and says, "I think I caught some air on that third one. It was just a fraction of a second, but I felt it. A little bit of hang time." Any of us can convince ourselves of anything, no matter how insane, and we do it all day. You say, "Well, that doesn't count because those guys are morons." No, they're not. Anybody recognize that guy right there? He's famous now. That is John Gray, author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Now, John Gray has a PhD. He's written 20 books. He's made tens of millions of dollars off of his books, his lectures, and his films. Smart guy spent 9 years in Fairfield, Iowa trying to levitate. I don't care how smart you are, you lie to yourself every single day. And my goal is to try and get you disillusioned. This is why you need to be disillusioned. And even to make matters more complicated, none of us can even see ourselves as we actually are because we all view ourselves in a funhouse mirror. We might be smart, but the mirror says we're dumb. We might be gorgeous, but the mirror says we're homely. We might be fascinating, but the mirror says we're boring and nobody wants to hang out with us. And it is impossible to live for very long in a manner that exceeds the image that you see of yourself in the mirror, which is why self-image is destiny. I'd like to introduce you to my pet, Toby. Toby the tortoise. This is what Toby looked like when my wife found him in the woods near our home in Austin, Texas, in the summer of the year 2000. He was so small that she was able to zip him up completely in her Sony Walkman case, and she brought him home to show to our son Cameron, who was only a year old at the time. That's my boy on his first birthday. He's now a sophomore at the University of Texas. And ever since that day, Toby has wandered our fenced-in backyard. Toby and Cameron have grown up together. This next picture was taken exactly 1 year after we found Toby. Toby is full grown, being held by my daughter Sarah, who was sitting with a family friend. At least, we thought Toby was full grown. Because up until that stage of his development, we just assumed that Toby was an ordinary run-of-the-mill Texas box tortoise. And boy, were we wrong. We began to wonder if maybe we were feeding him too much when a year later he looked like that. And then 3 years later, he looked like that. 5 years later, he looked like that. Toby, as it turns out, is an African sulcata, obviously somebody's exotic pet that escaped as a baby. Toby weighs over 90 pounds, and he's only half grown. His species is the largest land tortoise in the world outside the Galapagos and a few other islands. This next picture was taken at Halloween 5 years ago. Toby went trick-or-treating as Lady Gaga. And the family resemblance is astonishing. And this is what Toby will look like in 10 years and 100 years. You see, if Toby lives out his full life expectancy, by the time he dies, I will already have been in the grave for almost a century. In fact, to give you an idea of just how huge Toby will be in the year 2118, I will now superimpose a scale drawing of the skyline of Chicago. He's going to be huge. Toby is a magnificent creature, but Toby has a problem. Toby has a problem I'll bet some of you have. Toby has a self-image problem. It's true. Toby is huge, but he thinks he's small. We have a wrought iron gate that leads from our back sidewalk to our driveway. The iron bars are 2.5 inches apart. I measured them. Toby is constantly trying to walk between them. He gets his head through and has no idea why he stops. He'll walk in place for 1.5 minutes before he figures out he hasn't gone anywhere. Toby is forever trying to walk under things that are only 6 inches high. There have been many occasions during which we've been sitting at the dinner table only to look out the back window to see lawn furniture moving across the yard. I have one final photo. This is Toby hiding. He'll stay there for hours thinking nobody can see him. You see, after living with Toby for almost 2 decades, I am convinced he has no idea that back part even exists. Toby is huge, but he thinks he's small. And because he thinks he's small, he lives as though he is small. Every year, Toby has grown larger, heavier, stronger, more powerful until present day he is downright unstoppable. Even as our old wooden fence grew progressively more rickety and rotten. Until I was finally forced to change it out, there were places I could break it off with 2 fingers. Toby could have walked right through it like it were made of paper. If only he knew that he could. But I think I know what happened. He tried a few times when he was that big and the fence was brand new, decided it couldn't be done, and never tried again. Toby's not confined by our fence. Toby's like you. Toby is imprisoned by his ridiculously low estimation of his own capabilities. Toby is held captive by his overblown, exaggerated view of the obstacle that lay in his path. I've told my friends for years that if Toby ever figures out what a magnificent and powerful creature he is, God help us all. We won't be able to keep him. We'll have to put him in a zoo. And if you ever figure out what a magnificent and powerful creature you are, God help anybody who tries to stand between you and your dreams. You will go out and begin to achieve things that up until now you have feared were impossible, at least for you. But the magic will never happen out here until it first happens in here. You've got to get yourself disillusioned. Now, as I said, I do a full magic show with a whole lot of comedy, but I build into it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 segments of content to combine training and motivation and comedy and magic all together in a presentation that is bound to dazzle your folks if you use it to open your conference, close your conference, or just turn a banquet or a luncheon into something truly special. And with 1 second left, I walk off. Okay.